Hello, dear friends. My name is Dmitry, and I work for the Dmitry Nikitin School. And today with us is Maureen MacGarvey, all the way from London. You may know Maureen because she's so famous in managing ELT organizations all over the world. And at the moment, Maureen is working in very close cooperation with the Dmitry Nikitin School, and she's one of the teachers of our School for Managers we are about to start in March. And today Maureen is giving a talk on building the school culture, building the organizational culture in an LTO language teaching organization. So without further ado, Maureen, you are very much welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Dmitry, for inviting me to give this talk. And the original title of the talk was How to Create a School Culture. Hello, Anita. But I'm not going to talk about how to create a school culture because every school has its own culture and I can't give you a kind of step-by-step list of this is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. But as Dmitry Sergeyevich said, I've been working very closely with the Dmitry Nikitin School for the past, I think, about 9 months almost, Dmitry.
Well, more than a year.
More than a year. You see, it's going so quickly.
Including consultancies.
That's right. That's right. So, and part of the work we've been doing is to redefine and redevelop the school culture. And so what I'm going to do in this talk is put to you a lot of questions about your organizational culture that Dmitry Sergeyevich and I had to work through as part of this project that we've been going through for the past 9 to 12 months, because every culture is individual and there's no step-by-step guide, but I think the questions are interesting. So I'm just going to get my slides up, okay, and I will on occasion ask you to pop things in the chat box, but I'm happy to stop and take any questions through chat if you want. So the title of the talk is How to Create a School Culture, and what does that even mean? What does a school culture mean? So let's start by going over to you, and I want you to think about your school and how would you describe the relationships between you and your staff? If you had to define them, you'd say we're like or we are Could you put some answers in the chat, please? How would you describe the relationships? Are you like a football team? Are you like an orchestra? You know, let's have a little look. Whoops. Okay, so a research group, a music band, Julia. I won't ask you what type of music because that's a little bit dangerous. Okay, there are lots of ways that you can define your school culture, and how you define it isn't always how you might want it to be. So I'm going to give you now what I think creates a school culture, what the 5 aspects are of a school culture, okay? And they are as follows. Excuse me. Shared principles and objectives, your management style, relationships among staff, communication style, and trust and transparency. And we're going to unpick these as we go through, but these are what I consider to be the 5 aspects that make up your school culture. Okay, and you may or may not have thought of these in a great deal of detail, but they're all very important. So looking at the first one, which is shared principles and objectives, let's look at the questions that you can ask yourself about establishing shared principles and objectives, okay? So are your principles and objectives clear? It's very important as a language teaching organisation that you have clear objectives for what you want to achieve and clear principles. I know a language school who makes a great deal of ethics and behaving ethically and behaving in a correct manner in a global context, etc., etc. But they do a lot of business with countries whose ethics might be a little questionable in political or in human rights terms. So you can see there's a mismatch between stated principles and acted principles, what Donald Schoen called espoused theory versus theory in use. Espoused theory, what you say you believe; theory in use, what you actually articulate. Are your principles and objectives known to all your staff, and how do you know that they know? You know, are you just assuming that everybody knows? And are they applied consistently? Okay. If you asked your staff, for example, they may say that the principle of the school, the objective of the school is to make money. Now, that's a reasonable objective because if you're a private language organization, everybody wants to stay in a job. But if your staff view that as your overriding objective, then you will have some difficulty, I would suggest, in getting other changes or adaptations accepted by your staff because they see an inconsistency there. Your management style, this is a very interesting one to look at. Could you define your own management style, I wonder? I'm not going to ask you to put it in the chat box because that's a little bit too revealing. But it's interesting to think if you had to define your management style, how would you define it? And would your staff say the same as you? You know, you might say, oh, you know, I'm completely open to my staff. Whenever they need me, I'm there. You know, I'm like a mother to them. But if your staff come in and they see your door is always closed and they open the door and you say, go away, I'm really busy. Sorry, I can't talk to you now. Then they would view your management style very, very differently. I don't think it would be an easy task to ask your staff what they think of your management style, but it might be interesting to consider how your actions might contradict what you think you are doing. And this disconnect is something that you'll see is running through already, how you perceive yourself as being and how you actually are. And do you always use the same management style or do you change it? And if you change it, why do you change it? And looking at management styles, there are basically three main types of management style. There's an authoritative management style. Now, let's be careful here because there are two very similar adjectives in English, as you know. One is authoritative and the other is authoritarian. Now, if your management style is authoritarian, what you say goes, that's it, there's no discussion. An authoritative management style carries behind it the weight of knowledge and experience, and your staff trust you. So an authoritative management style is not a negative management style, but it has to be earned over time. There's a persuasive management style, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. There's the paternalistic or maternalistic management style. Now, some of you earlier on may have thought, oh, our school culture, we're like a family. But as you know, families aren't always the best functioning units in which to find yourself. And managing your staff with a maternalistic style is not always the best way to work with your staff. I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Eric Byrne and his work on transactional analysis. And he basically said, whether you agree with him or not, he basically said there are three ego states, if you like. There's parent, adult, and child. And within these three ego states dictates how communication and collaboration is managed. So if you, as a manager, adopt a maternalistic management style, you're encouraging your staff members to respond to you as a child, which is where a lot of conflict can arise. Or you approach them as a child seeking approval for decisions you've made, and they are then in parental mode and can slap you down, or in other child mode and start to bicker with you. And what you really want is a communication that goes adult to adult. Okay, so while it's nice to think that your organization is a family, I'd question the effectiveness of that in terms of managing a professional staff. And if you wanted to read more about management styles, I find this link quite helpful. There is another type of management which became very popular in the 70s, 80s, possibly even a bit later. And it's called MBWA. I don't know if you've heard of this. It stands for Management by Walking Around. And with this, the theory or the thinking is that managers need to get out of their office where they're locked away from the staff and be around more in the staff areas where their people are, so they can have conversations, etc., etc. This is a great way to work if it's a natural way to work and your staff don't feel that you are like the police coming over their shoulder. I remember a director I know who felt he was very isolated from his staff. And so at a staff meeting, he said, I know a lot of you don't see enough of me and wonder what I'm doing all the time. So every Wednesday and Friday from 8:15 till 9 o'clock, I will work at this desk in the staff room and you'll be able to talk to me and I'll answer any questions you may have. And because it was so artificial and because he clearly felt so uncomfortable, 8:15 every Wednesday and Friday, you would find very few teachers in the staff room because they were so embarrassed by him being there, because it was not a natural, hi, Dimitri Sergeyevich, how you going? What's happened with your cousin? Is he better now? How's your class going? That kind of MBWA is fine, but the here I am for you, or the police over your shoulder, oh my God, is not so effective. Okay, so I'd consider that one, but I'd be careful with it. Let's look at relationships among your staff now. And I want to look at 4 elements here for you to be asking yourself these questions and thinking about your staff relationships. Do academic staff know all non-academic staff and vice versa? This to me is a real central point for any work on organizational culture, because you're trying to establish a culture for the whole organization. And of course, you'll get different cultures in different staff groups at times. But if the non-academic staff don't know who the academic staff are, and the academic staff have no idea who's working in customer services, you're always going to have a gap there. So it's something to think about, even as part of induction of new staff. Do you take them around to all departments and introduce them? Do all staff come to your staff meetings or not? Is there mutual professional respect among staff? Do your academic staff respect your administrative staff and vice versa? I remember when I first started working, my father said to me, there are 2 important people that you have to get to know really quickly. And I said, oh, what, Daddy? Because I thought, oh, he's going to say, you know, like your line manager or the head of department or what have you. He said, you've got to get to know the cleaners and you've got to know whoever's got the keys. Because there's going to come a time where you're going to need the cleaners to sort something out, or you're going to need to get in at the weekend and you need to know whoever's got the keys, which was a good lesson for me because I was thinking sort of in terms of hierarchy, but he was thinking these are the people that keep your school ticking over. Now, do some staff have your ear more than other staff? Think about this. If you started your school with 1 or 2 people and then like Topsy, it just growed, as they say, you might find that those staff who started with you can talk to you or put their view to you more easily than staff who've come on later. Now, I'm not saying you can't talk to people that you've known for a long time. Of course, I'm not saying that. But it can make your other staff a little bit uncomfortable if they feel that one person can go into your office and put a problem to you and get a solution and other people can't. This growing of an organisation from small to large can often establish, and we'll talk about this when we work at the School of Language Project Management in May, establish what's called a club culture, where certain people are very, very tight to the centre and the others can feel marginalised. So it's worth thinking about this. Do staff members come to you if they have a problem? Now, I suspect that for some of you, the answer will be, well, yes, of course they do. And I want them to, because as I said to you earlier on, Maureen, my door is always open. I'm like a mother to these people. You know, they can come to me whenever they want, but they shouldn't necessarily do that. If your organisation has grown and you have appointed, let's say, an academic director, a teacher who has a problem with a class or an academic matter should go to the academic director and get that issue solved there. If they feel they come to you and bypass the academic director, that's undermining the academic director, and it's sending a very clear message: don't listen to her, because if you go to the director, you'll get what you want. So it's quite important to think about the type of communication you have with staff and whether, I mean, it's nice, isn't it, to think anybody can come to me if they have a problem, but really, if you're a school owner or a school director, staff members shouldn't be coming to you with every problem, because you should have a structure that's allowing those problems to be dealt with in a different way. Okay, any questions so far? Or anything anybody wants to ask, or you can put in the chat if you want. Okay. Let's move on to communication start. This fascinates me with language teaching organisations because communication is our business and we are generally not terribly good at it. And if you ask any manager about communication, they'll say, oh, you know, I'm communicating all the time. You know, I'm sending out emails, I'm talking to people, I'm doing this, that, and the other. And if you ask staff, they'll always say communication here is rubbish. We've got no idea what's going on half the time. So obviously there's an issue with communication. So the first thing to think is, how is information communicated? And are you using communication channels which suit you or which are most accessible for staff? Now, I say this because as an academic manager myself, I've been guilty of this, and I've also seen it backfire with other colleagues, that if you're a manager, you're often at your computer for a lot of your day. So it's very easy for you to fire things off by emails, etc., etc., etc. Particularly academic staff, I would say, in the workplace, don't read their emails in the same way as managers or indeed administrative staff. And so if you feel that you're sending emails and staff are not responding to them or are saying, I never read that, then it might be worth reconsidering how you communicate. I always found it really effective for important communication for teachers to have a notice board above the photocopier, because I don't know a single teacher who doesn't photocopy something at some point in the day. And I used to have it divided into two sections: hot news and cool news. And hot news was something that was happening now in the next couple of days, and then it would get moved across to cool news. And that meant that I had to sort of go and, you know, stick up the notices, etc., etc. But it was more effective for teachers to see that notice boards are very underused. I could give a whole seminar on notice boards if I was ever asked to do so. And how often do you consult with staff? Very often staff feel that they don't have any input into decisions which are directly going to affect them, or that their concerns or problems or operational issues that they're aware of are not taken into account before a decision is made. And interesting which staff you consult with as well. If you are, as I mentioned earlier, consulting with those 2 or 3 people who have your ear, then you're not getting a feel for the whole staff. And do you use, I call it, because I don't know what else to call it, the 3-step consultation model. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. Let's say that you and your senior management team, if you have one, are thinking about, perhaps it could be a new course or a new market that you want to break into, and you've discussed this and you've got some ideas of how it would work. You're in the early stages of working it out. If you present this to staff and ask for their input, so your thinking is stage 1 and kicking it around and getting a rough plan. You present it to staff, that's if you like stage 2, and you get their responses. And their responses will take longer than yours, because remember, this is the first time they've heard about it and you've been thinking about it for a few weeks now. But you get their feedback, which may be positive, may be negative, that might bring up those operational issues I just mentioned. You take that back and you look at it and you decide, well, yeah, that is a valid point. I hadn't thought about that. I know what she means, but we can't do that now because of X. And the third step is to go back to your staff and say, okay, thank you for that consultation. A lot of ideas, some of which I hadn't thought about, and some of which I'm going to talk to you about now. We are going to adopt Julia's idea of X. We are going to adopt Elena's idea of Y. We're not going to adopt Dmitry Sergeyevich's idea of Z, because this, and this. So you're making your consultation a living thing of, I'm presenting, I'm listening, I'm reflecting, and I'm letting you know the outcome and why I'm accepting and why I'm not. And of course, people may not agree with your decisions, but at least you're sending a very clear message of, I'm asking you for input and I'm taking it seriously, and this is why. And this kind of thing, this whole communication style is critical for school culture. And it's very important that we don't do it in a haphazard way. It has to be done in a conscious way. And with bigger projects, as well as working out all the things you would work out associated, you should work out a communication strategy for them. And it's sometimes worth thinking about conducting a communications audit in your school as a more formal process. And if you Google communications audit, you can find some useful templates you could use. Okay. The final point of the 5 points I mentioned at the beginning is trust and transparency. Do your staff trust you and your management team? And how do you know? And what could affect this trust? If there's a disconnect, for example, as we said earlier, between the principles you say you hold and the way you actually behave, that affects the trust of your staff. If you ignore staff's views and don't let them know why, that affects whether they trust you or not. And it doesn't come overnight. It's, you know, layer on layer on layer on layer of the way you work with your staff. And how do you know? Well, obviously you can't say to your staff, do you trust me? Go on, you can tell me. But you will know, hopefully because your antennae will be up, in terms of how they react to you and how they react to proposals that you put to them. Do you trust your staff? You know, how do they know? What could affect this trust? If you allow those staff members who have your ear to bypass your academic director and come to you, that sends a message of, I don't trust my academic director's judgment, for example. Yeah? And once management lose the trust of staff, let me tell you, it's walking up a mountain to get it back. How open are you with staff about the state of the business? Now, I'm not saying that you should open your financial accounts to staff, and obviously there are some things which are commercially sensitive which you can't share with staff. But if your school is losing business, your teachers know that. Teachers know what an empty school looks like. They know if student numbers are down. If you share with your staff on, right, we're 4% down in our teens groups this term, however, we've pulled up another 9% in our early years group. So overall, against last year, we're up 2.7% for this quarter. We're hoping to gain a couple of big contracts, which are commercially sensitive at the moment, but we are in conversation. And if we get those, I'll be looking for some specialist writing teams, so there could be some interesting projects coming up. I worked in a school that did this, and I was very impressed by this openness until I did realize, of course, that if I didn't know, because I didn't know the figures, I didn't know if 3% up was good or not good, but it does at least involve you as a staff member and make you feel you have an awareness of where the business is going, and that your suggestions for improving the state of the business will be listened to because of that 3-step consultation that you've done before. So I do think it's worth considering with your staff whether you involve them at this, one could say, more strategic level of information. That goes back to communication again. And how open are you to staff suggestions? You know, we can get very isolated in our role as a manager if we're not careful, if we don't get in with our staff enough and with our clients enough. You know, and also, for example, your customer service staff, your frontline staff are rooted in the community, and they have a fantastic network of contacts and local people, and their kids are in local schools, etc., etc. So soliciting those staff suggestions can be really helpful. And it's worth asking the question, do your staff like working in your school? And if they do, I wonder why they do. Is it because you pay the big bucks? Do you pay so much more than at other schools? Well, probably not. You might pay a bit more, but you're never going to pay double. But finding out if your staff like working in your school and why can give you a useful insight into what's important to staff. There's a man called Geert Hofstede, who's Dutch, who did a lot of work on corporate culture. And I won't go into all the dimensions here, but simply asking your staff a series of questions about what they like, what they don't like, what kind of people are important in your school, what do you have to do to progress in your school, can give you really some useful insights and help you to see where there's work that you can do. So just 2 minutes over time, I think. I'm just going to sum up now. School culture often just grows, but you need to be careful about how it's growing, and is it growing in the way that you want? As your school gets bigger, you can't have the same culture you had when your school was you and 2 teachers. And it's very important to be mindful of that. School culture can be different in different departments. You might have a finance department that's really strict, but that's quite good because, you know, you don't want your salary to be different every month because they're being creative with the accounting. Very few schools, I think, pay attention to defining or supporting the school culture. And it is the thing that makes working in your school different from working in school X, okay? And our attention can be taken by so many other things when we're managing a school, but being aware of the culture and being aware of the fact, and this is over and above everything to me, that you are working with people, you are working with individuals, and knowing those individuals and trying to get the best out of those individuals is what's going to make your school successful and make your staff want to stay with you. Because the school culture affects everything you do. So it's really vital that you understand it and develop it, because it can make working in your school a dream or a total nightmare, and nobody wants to be known as the director of that horrible school. Okay, any questions?
I have.
Yeah.
Always. Maybe Dmitry wanted to say something.
Yes, Anita.
Okay. Now my question would be how to like treat mistakes. Let's say, so if somebody I don't know, for example, does something they're supposed to be doing, and they kind of I don't know, if let's say like posting a post about something, so and they made a lot of typos or posted the wrong picture or the wrong date, and then at some point like negligence mistakes, let's say. So what would be the way to work with those, and how, I mean, for how long can you accept that? I mean, sometimes it's a slip, sometimes it's more of a habit. So how do you understand that somebody's just a bad worker, you know?
Yeah, this is this is a good question. It's a performance management issue, isn't it, really? Because everybody has bad days. And until I got my new glasses last week, I was constantly sending out emails with typos because I couldn't see the screen properly. But I think that you have to monitor your staff, don't you? You can't allow that kind of thing to go by, because it affects the reputation of your organization. And sometimes reputation is all we've got, you know, and you don't get a second chance to get a reputation very often, unless it's a bad one. But I do think it's to do with how you deal with it. If you're saying to a staff member, Anita, can I talk to you? That's the third email you've sent out with typos, and your posting was full of errors with the wrong picture. This is absolutely unacceptable. And I'm going to have to put you on a formal warning if you don't sort yourself out. Which is one way of approaching it, versus, Anita, we've got to talk about the postings that are going out, because that's the second one we've had with typos. Now, this isn't like you. So what can I do to help you with this? Or what systems can we set up? Is there anything going on that I need to know about? It is to do with how you deal with your staff. And as I say, you've always got to remember they're a person. But if, you know, you're a business and you want to treat people humanely, but you cannot support someone in your business who's not working to standard.
Mm-hmm. So how do you actually understand that? That's, I mean, when is the point that, how to, you know what I mean? If, especially if it's like a new person and they've worked for like 5 months with you, maybe tops.
I think, I don't know what your situation is in Russia. In the UK, with new hires, we have a system called a probationary period. Mm-hmm. And that's generally 3 months. And for 3 months, they are on probation, and either you or they can terminate their contract at any time within that 3 months. Mm-hmm. At the end of the 3 months, you meet and discuss and say, yes, you've passed your probation or not. In some cases, you make the decision to say, okay, you're doing okay, and I think you have potential, but we're not yet ready to move you on, so we're going to extend your probationary period for another 3 months. Mm-hmm. By 6 months, you should know. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that system, I think you can institute it informally And I think you have to have that difficult conversation. Say, look, this really isn't working out for me. You know, I can see you're enthusiastic. I can see you're keen. And I've worked with staff members. I've got a woman who coincidentally lives 2 streets away from me, a woman that was in a school I know, who seemed completely lovely for the first 8-9 weeks. And then the cracks started to come, and you think, oh, this isn't being done. Why have we lost that? This hasn't happened. And often because language school owners or directors were teachers themselves, we want to help people and we want to support people. But by supporting someone to continue being bad, you're not supporting them. Mm-hmm. So you do at one point, you just have to bite the bullet and say, look, I'm sorry. This isn't working out, and we need to talk about why and what's happening here and what we can do. What's the best way forward for you? Why are these things happening? You've always got to try to get to the root of it. So, you know, is it that we need to put other processes in place to double check? Do we need to meet more frequently? Should we meet 3 times a week for half an hour just so we can check in? Yeah, because sometimes people need a structured support and we think they should be able to run and they think they can't even walk yet. And sometimes you just have to say, I'm sorry, this isn't working out. I'm terminating your contract. That's the nasty bit.
Yeah.
That's the nasty bit. But you do nobody any favors by allowing somebody to stay in a job if they're doing it badly. Mm-hmm. Because that's just going to give you have staff to make your life easier, not for you to have to do everything again because they haven't done it properly. That's like me cleaning the house before the cleaner comes to clean the house. But that's a performance management issue as well, I think. Mm-hmm. Does that help in any way?
Because we are not a rehab center. We are not a rehab center, are we?
No.
We are
we're not
a place.
We're not a charity, you know. It's harsh, and you always want to see the best in people. And I'm a complete pushover, I know it. But there are points where you simply have to say, look, this is not working. Mm-hmm. I need to talk to you about this. But it should always happen sooner if you can manage it rather than later. If you have an appraisal system and you wait until the appraisal to have this conversation, that's too late. Mm-hmm. It's got to happen sooner. And it's not in an aggressive way or in a blaming way. It's, look, I've noticed this. What can we do? What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Because I can see you're really upset about this and you don't want to be working like this. So what can we do?
And when you have to make difficult decisions, I think that's crucial to think of other members, of other teachers, other admin staff members, because she is late 30 minutes every day. Other people are losing money because she can go on holidays without telling anybody or telling one day before she leaves. Other people have to replace and substitute her lessons. And I always think about other people who are doing their work properly, and in teaching cases, they will have to teach more because of teachers' inappropriate behavior. Yeah. So you are not kind of punishing a problem person, you are protecting other people and you treat other people equally.
That's really true, Dimitri Sergeyevich. And I think with teachers particularly, but I think with all staff actually, if you make it clear how their actions are impacting on their colleagues that they haven't even thought about, that is often a wake-up call for them. If you phone in 10 minutes before a class saying, I can't come in, and there's no record of what you've done, so the cover teacher has no idea what they're supposed to do, when that teacher comes back, you have to say, look, we've got to talk about this because you were late, you didn't come in, there was no work record. Anita didn't have a clue what to do with your class, so she just had to pull something out the air, and that's really stressful for her. You know, so you have to deal with these issues. And I think you're completely right, Dimitri Sergeyevich. is the impact on the broader staff. I think as the poet John Donne said, no man is an island entire of himself. And you're a connected organism as an organization. And you have to be healthy in all aspects of that organism, I think. Okay, I've gone well over time. So hopefully may see some of you at the School of Language Project Management in May. And there's my email address if you want to contact me directly. Dimitri Sergeyevich, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maureen. I know how hectic your schedule is. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for visiting the talk. And hope to see you in the spring or in the autumn. We start our educational programs for school managers in March and in September. So you are welcome to join us at the dnschoolinfo.ru. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, dear colleagues. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Dear colleagues, hope you enjoyed listening to Maureen MacGarvey and her talk on building the school culture. And if you are interested in learning more about how to build the school culture and what tools and techniques of building school culture to use with your teachers and admin staff members, you are welcome to join our course with Maureen MacGarvey and other teachers who are going to train you on how to run language schools even more effectively. The more info can be found on our webpage, dnschoolinfo.ru. Hope you will join our course and have a very good day.